Hey all, Alex here at your home of the Music Deep Dive, and today we have another record collection update video for you. It has been a long time since I've done one of these, going back to July of 2025, but we are here to do another one for you today. Now, as one might expect, there are a lot of things to go over in this video, more so than one of these usual videos, so we're going to go pretty rapid fire through all of these here. Not going to go into a lot of detail. But very curious to hear what your thoughts are about all of these in the comments. Just wanted to make sure that ultimately we caught up with everything. So, you know, people know what's been in the collection, what's been out of the collection, that sort of thing, if you care. So we're going to start with a couple of smaller releases. So we're going to start with this 7-inch here of Sabrina Carpenter's Please, Please, Please. Found this in a record store, Indie Earth, over in Buffalo. Found a couple of cool places, a couple of cool finds over there, so go ahead and give them a check if you're in the Twin Cities area. Please, 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 very possibly my favorite Sabrina Carpenter song, certainly my favorite on Short and Sweet. Just a brilliant single, and cool to have this kind of little eccentric 7-inch of it. I don't collect 7 inches normally, but a couple of these were just kind of too cool to pass up, so figured why not. This next one, this is quite a bit different. So this is a 10-inch here, not a 7-inch. But we got Fascinating Rhythm. Now, this is a single credited to Tony Bennett and Diana Krall. This is from their 2018 record, Love Is Here to Stay. And what's interesting about it is you can kind of see it in the focus there. Side A is the Tony Bennett and Diana Krall record. So with the Bill Charlap Trio accompanying them. Side B is Tony Bennett's first recording of Fascinating Rhythm. And if you know anything about Tony Bennett, you know that his version of Fascinating Rhythm was, I believe, his first recording ever, all the way back in 1949 under the pseudonym Joe Barry. So kind of a cool little thing. This came out for Record Store Day 2018. Found it used for pretty cheap, so figured that was a fun little addition to the collection. But now, move these back over here. We'll get into the meat and bones of it. Now, to start off, I'm just going to kind of call out right off the bat. A couple weeks ago, actually last week, I think, I was going to a local record store, and I just kind of made a point of buying a lot of singer-songwriter records, specifically female singer-songwriter records. It was International Women's Day this past weekend. It is Women's History Month this month in the United States. So, and there were a lot of kind of interesting selections that were like $3 and that sort of thing of artists who I have very little context of in general. So a lot of those records are going to come up in this video. I don't have a lot to say about them because I haven't listened to them yet, but I'm extraordinarily curious to know if you've heard any of these records and what your thoughts are. And we're going to begin right away with Margie Adam, songwriter. This record came out in 1976. I believe this is her first. When I was looking around, cool little gatefold that you can kind of see there. This is also a collaboration, or rather, Make Christian appears as kind of a collaborator on this one. And I do have a record of hers as well, which I've sampled a bit, and it's pretty good. So excited to dive into that. Now, this artist I'm very familiar with, and we're going to be going in alphabetical order in case you haven't figured that out. Tori Amos. I have expanded my Tori Amos collection a little bit over the past few months or so. It's been nice to kind of find these records popping up. They've been slowly reissuing a lot of her catalog over the last few years. The big one that I'm still missing is From the Choir Girl Hotel. They have not re-released that one yet. I know it's something to do with like the master tapes are lost or damaged or something like that, and that's been a big kind of barrier to that. But hopefully they will do something at some point, because that is one of my favorite Tori records and would love to get that on vinyl. But this is one of the most recent additions, literally as of yesterday. This is Strange Little Girls, her album of cover songs that came out in 2001. This just came out on vinyl a few weeks ago for, I believe, the first time ever. And as you can see, this is not the original cover. They had a variety of different colors, even in the initial covers, even in the original release on CD. And I think they added a couple more for this vinyl issue. I don't remember seeing this version of the cover on a CD, although I could be wrong. This is the Real Men cover, based off her cover of the Joe Jackson song, which is one of my favorite songs on the record, maybe my favorite. So yeah, it's not my favorite Tori album. In fact, in my ranking, it was at the very bottom. But again, Tori's floor is very high for me, and I still really respect what she's doing on here. It's very clever. She's really trying to, again, present these songs in different lights, oftentimes in massively different lights. And yeah, so really a risk-taking record that I respect quite a lot. Scarlet's Walk, fantastic album. Finally got this one on vinyl, thankfully. This was just re-released a couple of years ago, I think. So happy to have that. Unrepentant Geraldines. It's kind of impressive how easy this record is to find for a reasonable price. I want to say this only cost me like $15 or something. And this is like the deluxe edition, so you got extra bonus tracks, which is really cool. Yeah, so happy to have this. They also just reissued that a couple years ago. And then this one is an original from when it came out. My favorite of her kind of more recent records, Native Invader from 2017. Yeah, love this album. Really love this album. Super underrated in the grand scheme of things. Really creative record. Excited to, again, kind of see where she's developing. I really like the new single from her upcoming record in, In Times of Dragons. So we'll definitely be getting that one on vinyl. I thought about pre-ordering it, but just, financially, like, I've got enough excuses to buy records. I don't need more. Another artist who's been featured on the channel in a ranking video, Joan Baez. I have been working diligently on trying to complete this collection, both on vinyl and on CD. Just got a bunch of her CDs the other day, so I am very close to complete on her. There's a couple that I'm missing. But here's Farewell Angelina from 1965. Great record, really strong. One that's continued to grow on me over time since the video. The title track is certainly classic, certainly one of her best, maybe her absolute best Dylan cover. We got Joan from 1967. Really solid, really creative record there. Really interesting orchestrations. Speaking of Bob, we have Any Day Now, her collection of Bob Dylan covers. Happy to have this. This is one of the records that I got up when I was in Bemidji, Minnesota back in September. Found some really interesting finds there, including one like shocker, which we'll get to towards the end of the video. But yeah, cool to have that. David's album, really strong. This really kind of enters her into like the Nashville side of things. Great session work on that album, so highly recommend it. Come From the Shadows, very interesting album. This is her first that she put out on A&M, and yeah, really strong. The first couple of A&M records are not my favorites of hers by any means, but there's some really good stuff on here, so highly recommend it. And then again, we're completing the collection here, so Honest Lullaby. This is my least favorite Joan Baez record. I think it is a sign of an artist who is maybe at a little bit of a crossroads as far as what she wants to accomplish versus what is financially viable for her. And the results are not super great. I definitely prefer the first record that she did with CBS, but still, it's not bad. And again, I was able to get it for pretty cheap, so can't complain too much there. Again, just happy to expand the collection. One last Joan Baez record to show here. This is recently from 1987. Her first record with Gold Castle, and yeah, solid album. Really like her rendition of Brothers in Arms on here. She does that thing with like Paul's. This is the one she did the thing with Paul Simon on. No, I think that's the next record. But yeah, really solid. I prefer this to the other Gold Castle record for sure. Solid comeback for her. All right, this one is a behemoth. Kind of an album, kind of a box set, but I'll probably do another video on this channel at some point, just talking about the box sets that I have, because at this point I have accumulated quite a few. But I wanted to make sure that I showed this off, because this is predominantly a vinyl box set. This, of course, is the Beach Boys' We Gotta Groove, the Brothers studio years. Very hyped box set. People have been waiting for this for a long time. The set contains a remix of Love You from 1977, the very esoteric Beach Boys record, the lost classic, if you will. And then the true lost classic, In the Eyes of Some Adult Child, is released on here for kind of the first time, officially. And I say kind of only because there's a couple of songs from the original bootleg that are not on here, that sort of thing. And then there's some great outtakes. But just to quickly say, I love the box set. I love the set. I think it's sequenced really well, which is unique for a box set. And it's really satisfying. And I think they did it about as much justice as they could have. And from a mixing standpoint, I think it is head and shoulders above Feel Flows and Sail On Sailor, which have been critiqued pretty massively for their mixing and mastering for understandable reasons. Continuing on with artists who were featured on the channel, Tony Bennett, Cloud 7. This is a re-release from the late 50s, obviously, because it's a 12-inch and not the original 10-inch. Really solid album. I think as far as like his first proper like studio records go, this is a very eclectic and uniquely guitar-centric release. Chuck Wayne, the guitarist on that one. So really solid, really happy to have that. We have the Movie Song album, which if you remember from my Tony Bennett ranking was number 1. I think this is just the best combination of arrangements, diversity of arrangements, and vocals and material and everything, right? Bennett is not necessarily a guy who has made a record up to the level of like Frank Sinatra's best, for instance. And thinking about artists who I've covered on the channel, probably not Ella Fitzgerald, probably not even Nat King Cole, if I'm being honest. But this is the closest I think he gets to that in terms of just a unified record that is really well executed, really well performed, and has some interesting diversity. So really happy to have that. And then another Tony record, The Art of Excellence. This is his big comeback record from 86. Solid enough release. Can't complain too much. Surprisingly, I don't know. I guess I was expecting this to go for a little bit more money, but again, found it for only a few dollars. So I will take that. Bon Iver, Sable Fable. Now, I covered this record in a previous video, I'm pretty sure, because I pre-ordered the record on the Bon Iver website when it was announced, and I got the special yellow and black vinyl that they were putting out on the site at that time. Not the one that has like the autographed insert. I didn't get one of those, but even still, a unique pressing in all seriousness. And normally I'm not the type of person who gives a shit about colored vinyl. Like I generally could care less, or could not care less, I should say. But for whatever reason, again, maybe just because of the personal attachment that I had to this thing, I really wanted the salmon colored vinyl. Just, it is cool, it's eccentric, it's unique, and it just fit the vibe. And that is in fact what this is. You can see the kind of clear sleeve at the back. This was how it was shipped. And this is indeed the salmon and black vinyl. Looks amazing. I think they said it was only played once. So yeah, just super happy to have that. Like I said, I don't go out of my way to get colored vinyl usually, but this was one I really wanted in the collection. Clifford Brown and Max Roach, Study in Brown. This is one of these like European reissues of the record, hence the alternative cover. From what I understand, these pressings are still good. So it's not necessarily that, they're cheaping out and they're just piles of shit or anything. And again, just for their affordability, I think they're really nice and they're a lot more accessible to me from the places that I shop. Study in Brown, great record. I don't know if I like it as much as the self-titled Brown and Roach record, but absolutely great and a highlight of 1955, as I talked about in that video. Kate Bush, I've not talked about her a ton on this channel necessarily, but I do have a few of her records on vinyl. The Red Shoes is not one of my favorites of hers overall. In fact, I think when I initially went through her catalog, it was my least favorite. It has grown on me over time. There's some really damn fine songs on here, some really great just pieces of groove and feel and pocket and that sort of thing. And these late career Kate Bush records are hard to find for a reasonable price. They put them all out, a few years back. And it's, you know, you see them new in a store and they might be going for 50, 60 bucks sometimes, which I'm not willing to pay that. But this was, I think, like half price when I found it. I found it for like 20 bucks. And so it was an easy find. Really good quality vinyl. And again, some of the stuff on here, like Rubber Band Girl, And So Is Love, Top of the City, Why Should I Love You? I really like all those. Shout out to Prince with that latter one, by the way. Really good stuff. Right, so I just talked about Bon Iver Sable Fable, my favorite record of 2025, if you saw that video. And we'll get to talking about another one of my favorites. This is Tyler Childers' Snipe Hunter. Yeah, outstanding record. I can understand why some people find it's a little bit overproduced overall, but I'm all about it. I love the kind of excess of it, I suppose, and it's entertaining. It's moving at points, but for the most part, it's just a damn good time. And he's a clever enough songwriter to where, you know, you can have, I guess, a damn good time type of record and still find ways to make it really clever and engaging. So really like that one. Self-titled record by Bo Diddley. I did already have a copy of this, a reissue copy of it, but this is I don't think this is an original pressing. It's, I think, from like a couple years later or something, but found this for really, really cheap. I think it was a pretty easy find, pretty easy pickup when I ran into it. Just a classic, one of the best 50s rock and roll compilations, records of all time. Bo Diddley, just a massive figure who I don't think gets enough credit for what he brought to the genre. And yeah, just really entertaining figure, really great entertainer, really great musician. Just his stuff is a lot of fun. And some of the 50s rock and roll, him and Little Richard, I think, are some of the 50s rock artists whose material has aged the best into the 2020s and beyond. Bob Dylan, one Dylan record to show off here, and it's Self-Portrait. Yeah, I mean, it's Self-Portrait by Bob Dylan. What can you say? I found this one the other week at a place called Verbena Vinyl, which is in Northfield, Minnesota. So again, check them out if you have not been there. Yeah, I mean, I don't love this, of course. It's not my favorite Bob Dylan record. It's very bloated. It's definitely half-assed at points, intentionally half-assed. But there's still sharp material here, and you can tell, especially from listening to some of the other like outtakes from this period, that, you know, Dylan is still firing off on maybe not all cylinders, but plenty of them. And, you know, it's just, you know, bizarre that the record turned out the way it is. But because of that, it's become one of the big oddities in the history of rock music and folk music, right? So, just, you know, essential in its own way, just not necessarily essential because it's a classic album. This is another one of the singer-songwriter records that I was talking about earlier, Therese Adele. This is From Women's Faces. Again, I'm not familiar with this record. This came out in 1977. I feel like I remember this being like her second album or something like that. So again, if you know these types of records, if you have any feedback on them before I check them out, let me know in the comments. But really cool to have that. Duke Ellington. The Duke Plays Ellington. I talked about this in my 1954 video. This is Ellington playing solo piano material for a long time. And, you know, it's, or I should say it's trio material. It's not solo piano. And, you know, it doesn't reinvent the wheel. And Ellington at this stage of his career is not like the world's most dexterous pianist by any means, but it's still remarkable to kind of hear these songs germinate, hear these songs in a way as they were probably demoed out for the first time by the songwriter. And I think that's really special. So happy to have that. That was pretty cheap as well. Father John Misty. When we last left our protagonist, Father John Misty had 5 of his 6 records in my collection. The only one I was missing was Fear Fun. And that has changed now. Now, Fear Fun, I'll say this right now. When I did Father John Misty's discography a little over a year ago, I was not, you know, I was not as into this one as the other records, which, again, I still would have rated this, you know, extremely highly compared to most other albums. But To me, it felt like a preparation for bigger material coming up, I think, and that's part of why it was at the bottom. But man, I've been having a moment with this over the last few months or so, and it has absolutely risen in my esteem. I probably, at this point, if I were to do like an updated ranking, I would certainly put this above um, Chloe. I would certainly put this above Pure Comedy. And I might be convinced to put it above God's Favorite Customer on some days. It just kind of depends. But yeah, especially that opening, like 4-song run, Fun Times in Babylon, Nancy from Now On, Hollywood Forever, Cemetery Sings, and I'm Writing a Novel. And the track afterwards, Oh, I Long to Feel Your Arms Around Me. I love the sound of that one too. Just outstanding stuff. And the second side is terrific too. So just to know if anyone was disappointed about how I evaluated Fear Fun, it has grown on me. And I love it. And Father John Misty can do no wrong. I'm really excited for whatever his next record's coming out, which it feels like he might be teasing a little bit as we speak. Ella Fitzgerald, this is Ella in Berlin, Mac the Knife. Fantastic live album. Just super great. I mean, you can't go wrong, I think, with any Ella Fitzgerald live set from the 50s, 60s, or really probably even the 70s, I would say. But this is probably, I think, the most famous of her live recordings, and for good reason. It's absolutely dynamite stuff. And again, very affordable. That one I got at Toontown down in Mankato, Minnesota. Again, another great kind of indie record store you should check out. I know a lot of my followers don't live in Minnesota, but it's really cool to kind of shout out some of these indie places, since them as well as like local chains like Cheapo Records and Down in the Valley, and then of course Electric Fetus down in Minneapolis. Those are really the big places that I've been supporting. Errol Garner, Concert by the Sea. I actually think this was also a Toontown purchase. This is kind of a weird one because this is a 70s reissue, I believe, from like 71 or something. And this is kind of a fake stereo re-recording, reissue of it, I want to say. In fact, that's what it says on the hype sticker. So, you know, I got this for pretty cheap. That's part of why I purchased it. I will say I will probably get another copy at some point. I know they have, I think, the complete Concert by the Sea that they reissued at some point. That's probably going to be the target. But yeah, Errol Garner, Concert by the Sea is just one of the best jazz live albums of the 50s. I think it is just, you know, fantastic. It's really cool to hear kind of the interplay between like Garner and his other musicians, and to hear the audience response as well. Just really cool. Errol Garner, one of the most underrated jazz pianists ever. Bobby Gentry, Ode to Billy Joe. I've not heard this record, but I did get a couple of albums, also I think from Toontown, ironically enough, that were inspired by the Cocaine and Rhinestones podcast. Season 1, Tyler Mahan Co. does a lot of episodes on individual artists, so Bobby Gentry is one of the folks where you know, he does an episode talking about her. Ode to Billy Joe, of course, is her most famous song by some distance, but her career afterwards is actually kind of interesting as well to read about, or to listen about in this case. So definitely check out the Cocaine and Rhinestones podcast on this. Definitely looking forward to checking this record out, as well as her other stuff. David Gilmour, this is Rattle That Lock. Not my favorite Gilmour album. In fact, when I recently re-listened to his stuff, I would say this might have even been my least favorite. But I'm happy to own it. There's still a lot of stuff on here that I really enjoy, just because I'm a sucker for Gilmour, and I'm a sucker for late career Gilmour. And, you know, a couple of these tracks are also performed at the live kind of theatrical film thing that he did, that he put out late last year. The name of which is escaping me. It's the Rome concert that he did, and Live at the Circus Maximus. That's what it is. And it's stellar. First off, I saw that in theaters. I saw it at an Alamo Drafthouse in the Twin Cities when it came out. So worth it. You know, like I probably will never see Gilmour live just because he doesn't really tour that much. And when he does, he doesn't come to my part of my neck of the woods. But fantastic live performance. The Blu-ray release is great too. Highly recommend checking it out. But they do a couple of songs from Rattle That Lock on here, on that live performance. And it's really helped this record kind of grow on me over time. So definitely worth checking out. A Boat Lies Waiting. A Boat Lies Waiting is one of my favorite solo Gilmour songs. Absolutely beautiful. Lynn Gold. This is a self-titled record, I believe. Again, another one of the singer-songwriter folk artists that I was talking about. This one is interesting because so this is a Warner Brothers release. But this is another Albert Grossman client. Albert Grossman is credited as the producer of this. This came out in 63. So, in some respect, Lynn Gold is at this point in time a peer of Bob Dylan. And I don't think that she put out any other material when I was looking at this. But still really interesting. And based off the text in the back, it's clear they're trying to kind of market her as another Joan Baez, but maybe a Joan Baez who Albert Grossman has control over, because I don't think he managed Baez. But yeah, really interested to check that out. If nothing else, I think that'll at least be a little kind of interesting piece of history. Dave Guard and the Whiskey Hill Singers. Dave Guard, of course, formerly of the Kingston Trio. This is the first record. I think it's the only one. He might have done a second record with the Whiskey Hill Singers. I can't remember offhand. It doesn't reinvent the wheel. It's fine. I actually think the most interesting person on here is Judy Henske, who she's also an interesting kind of folk artist from the early 60s who does some interesting solo work if you haven't heard it. And it's clear that I think when you listen to this record, you can kind of hear the direction that the trio might have gone if Guard had stayed in the driver's seat. And to be very honest with you, I think it's a less interesting direction than where they actually went with Jon Stewart afterwards, focusing a lot more on contemporary material and, Stewart writing his own songs for some of it, that sort of thing. But it's a nice lightweight folk release from the early 60s, worth your time. This is the self-titled record by Gully Boys. Gully Boys are a Minnesota-based rock band, and these folks are some of the most hyped rock artists, local artists in the local scene right now. And they've been hyped for a while. They've been a thing for a few years now. And they've not put out a lot of studio work. This is their debut full-length record, and otherwise it's been singles here and there. But their live shows, I've never seen them live, although I would like to, but their live shows have kind of taken on this almost legendary quality around here. Some of the best rock music going in the Twin Cities area for sure. Really, really talented stuff. Their lead singer, Kathy, is a hell of a vocalist. Really, really powerful. Their drummer is really awesome as well. So really good stuff, really fun. They're really, they're a rock band that don't take themselves too seriously. I think they're all self-taught, which makes it even more impressive, how proficient they are at their instruments and that sort of thing. So really cool. George Harrison Electronic Sound. There's not much to say about this record. I'm not a big fan of it, but this was an original pressing that I found at a record store that was $15. And I would like one day to get complete on the various solo Beatle discographies. I'm not that close to being there. I'm not complete with any of them right now. But that was one of those things where it's all right, it's cheap enough, might as well get it. It's a quirky record, but really not worth exploring in my personal opinion, especially because George himself isn't really on it for the most part. Just inessential. Honey Drippers, self-titled release, Volume 1. Talked about this in the Led Zeppelin solo albums video last year. It's an interesting little oddity, a bunch of covers and stuff like that done by this band featuring Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, dedicated to Ahmet Ertegun, the president of Atlantic Records. Not essential by any means, but it's fun. So happy to have that. Ian and Sylvia, Early Morning Rain. This is either their second or their third record, I want to say. Their third record, I think. A solid folk duo from this era. Again, very much peers with your Joan Baez's, your Mimi and Richard Fariñas of the era, that sort of thing. And of course, they're doing Early Morning Rain, the Gordon Lightfoot song on here. I want to say this was the definitive version of that song, in fact, for some time anyways. So, cool to have that. Cool to have that as part of the collection here. Iron and Wine, Woman King. A few Iron and Wine things here to breeze through. Great EP. Really up there with like their best studio albums, in my opinion. The title track, Jezebel, Freedom Hangs Like Heaven are all fantastic. There's a real spiritual, theological bent to this release in particular. That's really cool. So yeah, very much, I know people are very attuned to the idea of studio album is superior always and that sort of thing. But yeah, really just cannot recommend Woman King enough. I think it stands up to their best studio work for sure. Kiss Each Other Clean from 2011. This is a record I underrated for some time, but the more I come back to it, the more I think this is actually like a really brilliant step forward from The Shepherd's Dog. Not a step above it. Like The Shepherd's Dog is still probably my favorite Iron and Wine record, but I like that he kept going, that Sam Beam kept going for this maximalist production style. Very influenced by like the more eccentric, like 70s rockers and that sort of thing. Like 70s, like Light FM, that sort of thing, not like hard rock. And yeah, Walking Far From Home, Tree by the River, Rabbit Will Run, Your Fake Name Is Good Enough For Me. Excellent stuff. They did a couple of these songs at the Iron and Wine show that I saw in Viroqua, Wisconsin last summer, which is actually also where I got this copy of the record, because you don't see them in the wild super often. At least you didn't at the time. So yeah, happy to have that. And then the last Iron and Wine thing that I have is actually their newest record, Hen's Teeth, which just came out a few weeks ago as of recording. Hen's Teeth is one. So this came from the Lightverse sessions, from what I understand. They had a bunch of songs and they ended up kind of splitting them into two separate crops. So Lightverse got one crop and then Hen's Teeth got the second crop. And I don't like this crop as much as Lightverse, which is not saying a whole lot, because Lightverse, I think, stands right up with the best Iron and Wine albums, especially over time. I've grown to feel that way. But this still, there's an earthier quality, I think is how they describe it in the promo materials, and I would agree. There's a little bit of an edge to this that I think is really cool. There's the collaboration with I'm With Her, Robin's Egg, which is really fun. Really cool vibe there. Nothing that jumps to the heights of Lightverse, like Tears That Don't Matter or Taken by Surprise, like two of my favorite Iron and Wine songs ever. Those were fantastic live, by the way, but still really good. They are coming to Minnesota this summer, this spring actually, so I might try to see them if I can. This is essential. I've always known that I wanted this record ever since I saw the cover. And it's unfortunate that it's my first record of this artist, because I know he has a lot more like worthwhile material to pick up from there. But George Jones, I Want to Sing. I've never heard the album. I don't know if it's any good. I know that 70s George Jones is like one of the most hit or miss periods of his career, for many, many reasons. But I mean, come on. Come on. Like, this is a cover. I think I've seen this in the wild occasionally, but eventually I was like, I'm never going to find this, or if I do, it's going to be priced up because people know this is a collector's item. So I just got it online, and well worth it. Happy to have it. I hope to frame it in my house one day, maybe above my bed. Avi Kaplan, Floating on a Dream. Cool find. I ordered this off of Vinyl Tap in Nashville, so this is actually a signed copy. You can make out the signature there, kind of. Avi Kaplan, former bass singer of the a cappella group Pentatonics that I used to be really into as a teenager. And his solo work is really nice. It's not, again, reinventing the wheel or anything. It's kind of pretty safe indie folk material for the most part. But it's quite nice. And this record of his from 2022, I believe, is quite pleasant in and of itself. So happy to have that. Josh Kaufman, What Do the People in Your Head Say to Each Other? Josh Kaufman is this like virtuoso producer, musician who is probably most well known by the average person, the person watching this video, because he is one of the members of Bonnie Light Horseman. who I got to see in concert in September. Fantastic show, absolutely fantastic. Great live performers, such a cool mixture of folk and rock music. Also, Justin Vernon from Bon Iver was in the audience, which was really cool. So shout out to him. Um, but yeah, this is his first solo album. This was released on Bandcamp. This initially it was released a couple of years ago, but they did a vinyl pressing of this, limited to I think supposedly 100 copies. And I jumped on it because I had not heard the record at the time, but I figured, one, it's just a cool way to support a musician directly like that, and two, I'm sure it was going to be good, and it is good. It's a bunch of this kind of like free form, it's kind of almost jazzy type of low key music, which is really cool. Some great musicians, some great playing on here. Not like the most energetic thing in the world, but it doesn't need to be. And yeah, just well crafted and well produced for sure. Kaufman's production style, which he does on all the Bonnie Light Horseman records, which he has also done on the Emily Scott Robinson record from this year, Appalachia, which is my favorite album of 2026 so far. I might do a video on that eventually. Yeah, just a really great producer, really great savant of a talent. When I was watching the concert, again, I saw Justin Vernon in the audience. He was in like the balcony sections of the Fine Line where this was at. And there were moments in the guitar solos that Kaufman would take where you could see him kind of leaning over the banister because he was trying to figure out what Kaufman was doing with his like fingers and that sort of thing. It was such a cool little like geeky moment of enthusiasm. Really, really cool stuff. But yeah, Josh Kaufman, his first record, really cool. All right, we're like halfway through this pile, so I'm going to really try to speed up here. Brenda Lee, self-titled record, I believe her first record from 1960, I want to say. Yeah, I have not heard a lot of Brenda Lee stuff, but of course, this is the record that has the famous I'm Sorry on it. Again, connected to Cocaine and Rhinestones, Tyler Mahan Co. on season 2 of that show. There's a great little bit where he's talking about the Nashville sound, and he talks about the making of I'm Sorry, and comparing that to like what Skeeter Davis was doing at around that same time. Really interesting stuff. So got that record for pretty cheap and happy to have it. We get to a couple of Beatles-related ones. John Lennon and Yoko Ono, Milk and Honey. Of course, the posthumous record from 1984, posthumous for John Lennon's terms. And yeah, it's not, this is actually a promotional copy too. I didn't even notice the print on the back here. But yeah, cool. It's got the hype sticker and everything. It's not, it's outtakes from the Double Fantasy sessions, and a lot of the songs are very, very clearly incomplete. But the stuff that Yoko has, I think really adds to it and helps kind of fill it out. And it makes it feel, it's kind of like the Free as a Bird, Real Love effect from like the Beatles anthology, which, where like Lennon feels like a ghost. Like it's very obvious that his parts are not fully complete in that sort of thing, but it kind of works, in like a haunting way, I suppose. So good stuff on there. Like Nobody Told Me is fantastic. Borrowed Time I really like too. So there's plenty of good material on there. And again, just happy to have it. Lennon, I'm like, apart from the experimental records, I think I'm only missing 1 or 2 of his at this point. So getting closer to complete with him. And getting closer to complete with Sir Paul McCartney. This is New from 2013. A record that I liked at the time because this was the first like solo Beatle record where I remember it coming out. I remember the hype around it. Got the CD when it came out. And yeah, very different, of course, because I hadn't heard the other solo Beatles stuff for the most part. So it was like, oh, wow, maybe I know Band on the Run, and then here's New, which sounds nothing like it. But it's grown on me over time. I probably still prefer Chaos and Creation in the Backyard and Memory Almost Full, the records that came out before this. But New works because of the balance of producers that it has. It's kind of a nice cross between like what Memory Almost Full accomplished and what Egypt Station accomplished afterwards. 2 other records that I would love to get on vinyl. Egypt Station I will at some point. Memory Almost Full, they're going to have to reissue that because that thing is just ridiculously expensive. Going back to the singer-songwriter well here, we have Mary McCaslin with Prairie in the Sky. This came out in 1975, I believe. I think, again, this is like her first or second record. Again, have not heard this yet, but looking forward to doing so. Similar thing with this record, which I believe is the most popular of the singer-songwriter pieces that I picked up. self-titled record by Kate and Anna McGarrigle, um, which came out in early to mid 70s, 75. Yep. Um, Again, this is another record that I've not heard that much about, but when looking at like Rate Your Music and that sort of thing and Discogs, like this clearly has a lot more attention than others. So, yeah, very, very curious to explore it. But again, I know nothing about it. Clyde McPhatter, Ta Ta. Um, so this was one of those types of records that's like really obscure and never really expected to find this type of thing in a record store, but there you go. Clyde McPhatter, lead singer of the Drifters. At one point, randomly, I checked out his solo work a few years back, and yeah, it's nothing special by any means. Like it's unfortunate that McPhatter never really made a solo career work, and that he kind of died in some form of obscurity in the 70s, I believe. But you know, it's still entertaining material, and the guy, of course, had this remarkably charismatic voice that really kind of carried, carried even like the lesser material. So Tata, I don't remember this being like my favorite of those records by any means, but it's cool to have it, and it's kind of an oddball title too. So cool to have it in the collection. Van Morrison, Common One. I did a dive of all of Van Morrison's studio albums last year. At some point, boy howdy, that was a lot. It was a lot. And I thought about making a video for it, but I just could not bring myself to make detailed notes for all 40 something records. But this was one of the standouts for me. I love this thing. This is very like John Martin-esque in terms of like how it uses ambiance and vaguely jazzy influences. It almost, like, to give a more contemporary comparison, it kind of reminds me of some of the more ambient stuff that like Bon Iver will experiment with at points. So just amazing stuff. It's a bit long, but the length doesn't matter to me much because the meditativeness of it all is kind of the point. So really happy to have that one. National Time, few national records. National Boxer. This one I just picked out yesterday, actually. I'm close to completing my collection with them. This was probably the best record of theirs that I did not already have. And, you know, not to spoil any national video too much, I would say this is the classic record of theirs that I'm probably the coolest on, just in the sense of I haven't had a wow moment with it the way that I have with like Trouble Will Find Me or High Violet or something like that. But that's not to say that there isn't just plenty of excellent material. It's one of their most, I think, consistent records from a quality standpoint, front to back. And yeah, just really, really great stuff. Green Gloves might be my favorite track on that. That's one I constantly go back to. I Am Easy to Find. Now, I already had a copy of this, but at some point last year, I decided, for reasons that I don't quite remember, to try to get a membership to the National Fan Club, the Cherry Tree Fan Club. I think it's because they do not just like exclusive like merch and stuff like that, but they also have like early access to tickets and that sort of thing. And so I was like, well, if the National announce a tour in 2026, I would love to get kind of that early access that might be useful. And this is one of the exclusive pressings. This is like a unique swirl vinyl pressing of the record. So I went ahead and splurged for it. There's other ones, like you can get like Laugh Track in like some sort of gold color, I want to say. But this was the one I wanted to get. And this is also one of the records that I have hanging up in my living room right now as well, because it's really grown on me. It's gone from being, you know, a mid-pack to lower tier national record for me to now being absolutely in contention for one of my favorites. Just superb. And then Rome, the live album that came out at the end of 2024. It's great. I underrated it when I first heard it. I didn't like the production that much. I thought Berninger's voice didn't sound superb. And the production, I think, is still a critique. It's definitely brick-walled for sure from a mastering standpoint. But boy, it sounds fire. Again, you're hearing some of these like Frankenstein and Laugh Track songs in a live setting for, you know, the first time or close to the first time, and they sound so much more energetic than they do on the studio records for the most part. And that really, really helps. So really great stuff. They did have an expanded edition of that was only a Cherry Tree exclusive thing. I didn't have access to it in time, but they just reissued that on streaming as well. So anybody can hear it at that point. They had like 4 new songs or something. Adding on to the list of folk artists, we have Holly Near with Speed of Light. This came out, I want to say this came out in like the 80s, like 85 or something like that. So one of the more recent ones that I got in the collection. Again, don't really know anything about her work. I do understand that she had put out a number of albums before this, though. So yeah, intrigued by that. This album I do know. This is Odetta Sings Ballads and Blues. This record initially came out in 1956, I believe. So whenever I get to that 56 video, which will come at some point, this will certainly be high up in the list. Odetta has just such a fantastic, evocative voice. Not to overuse the word, spiritual when it comes to singers of any kind, especially singers who are singing like gospel adjacent material. But you do really feel that. Her material certainly was an influence on like your Joan Baez's of the world and that sort of thing. Great guitar player too. So yeah, just essential record to understanding kind of where folk music was in the late 50s, heading into the early 60s before your Baez's and Bob Dylan and the Greenwich Village scene in general just really took over. Les Paul and Mary Ford, The Hitmakers. This is a compilation record, I believe, of a lot of their most famous songs from this era. This record initially came out in 51. And this is a reissue of it for sure. The jacket of this one's like really like beat to shit all over the place, but the vinyl itself is all right. And yeah, I mean, Les Paul like was doing some of the most unique experimental recording technique stuff in the late 40s and early 50s with the advent of magnetic tape and that sort of thing. And you hear that in like so many of their songs. How High the Moon is the most famous example, of course, with those like multi-tracked harmonies, but you hear it kind of all over the place, really. So really great stuff. Pink Floyd, The Division Bell. My Pink Floyd record collection is very strange in the sense of I don't have most of the big name records. I have The Dark Side of the Moon, and then I think you jump ahead to Momentary Lapse of Reason after that. And I have that and now The Division Bell. I will get some of the big records like Wish You Were Here at some point, but I've always wanted this one. I've always had a soft spot for The Division Bell. It's a record that I really enjoy overall. Again, I'm a sucker for solo Gilmour, so Gilmour being the feature of those records is not downgrade by any means. It's just kind of different. So several great songs on there. I've been recently obsessed with the song Keep Talking. It's kind of cheesy, it's kind of silly with like the talk box stuff and the Stephen Hawking samples, but what can you say? It's still great stuff. And the closing track, High Hopes, is just magnificent. Margo Price, Hard-Headed Woman. I talked about this record in my 2025 albums video. I got this one in a record store up in Bemidji, Minnesota. This is has a signed insert in it, which is really, really cool. Special colored vinyl as well. Again, I love her attitude in general. She's someone who I've known of for quite a while, but was not like tuned into in a real way. Hadn't really checked out her music until seeing the Farm Aid performance in Minneapolis this year. Again, I wasn't at Farm Aid, but I watched the live stream of it. And, just seeing like her performance there was really cool. Again, her attachment to the whole Jimmy Kimmel controversy as well, because like her song was the last one performed before the show was temporarily taken off the air or whatever. Yeah, she's really entertaining, and I really look forward to checking out more of her stuff. So, let me know your favorite Margo Price record in the comments so I have an idea of what to expect going forward. Prince is next. This record is going to require a quick story. This is Around the World in a Day, which is a great album, by the way. Love the album, love the kind of psychedelic influence of it. But I just want to talk briefly about the circumstances when I got this record. I got this album in January of this year. So this was right in the middle of the kind of ICE incursion in Minneapolis. And I got this on a Monday. So this was 2 days after the murder of Alex Preddy in the streets of Minneapolis. And Alex Preddy, the location of his murder was right outside several businesses, but one of the businesses was a Cheapo Records in downtown Minneapolis. Not like right outside the front door, kind of like on like the back side of the building, but still right next to it. That Cheapo Records I've been to many times. There have been a number of records that I've talked about on this channel before that I bought at that very place. I was just there to do Christmas shopping several weeks prior. So I was very familiar with that area. And that day I went down to Minneapolis. I went to the scene. I went to the memorial there to just kind of sit with my thoughts because everything felt so heavy. And I went inside the Cheapo as well because they were open. They didn't have any customers because it was a Monday morning, and everyone who was walking in was basically just walking in to get out of the cold for a few minutes because it was like 10 degrees out. And I was like, I wanted to support them because I felt bad for like the two people in there who were having to work, and just again wanting to support in general. And was looking for something with the local connection. And Prince is like a cliched answer, but I didn't really have anything else super in mind at that point. So I just found like a Prince record that I didn't already have, hence this being that one, and walked out. And so, yeah, it was the only thing I bought that day, but a very potent reminder of a very dark time, which not that we're not still living in dark times, but, at least it feels like the boot is off of Minneapolis's neck a little bit, which I appreciate. So all that to say is that very strong memory associated with that particular record that I will always appreciate in that way. And also they were playing David Bowie's Black Star over like the radio at that time, which just kind of made it feel even eerier in a lot of ways, since that record just turned 10 years old and it had been on my mind a lot anyways. Two more Prince records, Hit and Run Phase 1 from 2015. And then Hit and Run Phase 2 from 2016. In the cases of both of these records, these were just reissued on vinyl for the first time. Phase 1 is not my favorite Prince record by any means. That one is a little bit, I think, dated to the time a bit. But Phase 2, I think, is one of his best late career records. There's a really potent song on there called Baltimore. That's the opening track regarding the murder of Freddie Gray. And yeah, just really powerful. Tragic that it was his last record. It was never supposed to be, of course, but glad that, for a career that had a lot of high notes and definitely had a fair share of just kind of coasting, I suppose, as much as Prince allowed himself to coast anyways. Really cool that the career ended on a high note for sure. Another folk record that I've not heard yet, Martha Radcliffe, self-titled record. This came out in the 70s, I believe. I don't have a specific year. See? So again, if you know anything about that record or if you're really into it, let me know. Buddy Rich, Big Swing Face. I had a copy of this CD for a long time when I was first learning drums. My drum instructor at the time lent it to me. Yeah, I mean, it's Buddy Rich, right? Like he's one of the best entertainers who has ever sat behind a drum kit. Is he my favorite drummer of all time? No. Because I think his flashiness, it's by design certainly, but I don't think it's always in service of the music, but can't complain. And this is a great live record, from the, late 60s, from 67, I believe, and well worth your time. All right. We're in the home stretch. Powering through the rest of it here. Jeannie C. Riley, Harper Valley PTA, another Cocaine and Rhinestones recommendation. This is a track that they did a 3-part series on. One about like the signing of Jeannie C. Riley, one about herself and her own artistic evolution, and one about the songwriter Tom T. Hall as well. So really solid episode, really interesting song, great song. Again, have not heard the full-length record, but am excited to dive in at some point. Another folk record, Sally Rogers with The Unclaimed Pint. This came out in the late 70s, like 79 or 1980. More of a traditional folk record, it sounds like, than a lot of these other ones that are a bit more singer-songwriter, but still really excited to dive in. Couple of Linda Ronstadt records that I found for relatively affordable prices. This is maybe her most famous record, Hasten Down the Wind. Really cool stuff. Plenty of great songs on there. Love her voice as well. One of the best voices of the era for sure. And then this one I've actually been listening to and sampling a bit lately. This is What's New, her collaboration with the Nelson Riddle Orchestra. It's a little bit, again, it's from 83 and it sounds a little bit of its time in terms of like the sonic qualities of it in general. But again, some great interpretations of stuff there. Again, Ronstadt's voice works really well for it. I think Nelson Riddle's arrangements work really well for it as well. So yeah, happy to have it. I've also not heard this record. This is Lucy Rose with Something's Changing. Got this from, again, Vinyl Tap down in Nashville on a pretty deep discount. Lucy Rose is responsible for my favorite record of 2024. If you've not watched that video, check it out. Just make sure to grab some popcorn because it's a bit on the longer side. This is her third album, which came out in 2017. So I've not heard it. I understand that her earlier stuff is a little bit more kind of traditional singer-songwriter with guitar sort of thing. But yeah, worth having for sure. And a record that seems a little bit harder to find sometimes outside of that context. So happy to get it for a pretty deep discount. I think it was only like $8. Rush. Several Rush albums here to talk about. First off, Permanent Waves. One of my favorite Rush albums for sure. Sometimes a contender for my favorite. Definitely the best one that I did not already own. So made sure to finally add that to the collection. This is a pressing from the era, which is really cool. And then the rest of these are later career ones. Now, this first one is a bootleg, and it's a very kind of interesting bootleg. This is Vapor Trails. Now, I already had the remixed version, the official reissue of the remixed version that I think initially came out in like 2022 or something. This is a bootleg copy of the original mix. Now, I have sat with the original mix more and more of Vapor Trails in recent years, and there are parts of me that kind of prefer it to the remix. The remix is very, like, it doesn't suffer from the same, like, oh my God, like, everything's overcompressed, like the drums are just beating my head in type of problem that the original Vapor Trails suffers from. But it has a real muddiness and lack of clarity to it. It reminds me a lot of the Clockwork Angels mix, that's one of my biggest problems, my absolute biggest problem with that record. And so, yeah, this is a European bootleg, I believe, of the original record. Artwork and stuff is ripped from the CD or whatever, so it's not like super high quality or anything, but really cool oddity. I found this in Toontown in Mankato. It wasn't cheap, but, it's hard to find bootlegs online because a lot of places won't actually like be willing to sell them. And, legitimate like vinyl pressings of the original mix. There are some out there, but I mean, they're hundreds of dollars. So I figured why the hell not? And now I have 2 copies of Vapor Trails by Rush on vinyl. So cool. Couple of new reissues. This is the Feedback EP from 2004. They just repressed this one and Snakes and Arrows on vinyl earlier this year. So managed to grab those. Really happy to finally have all these late career records. I had been kicking myself for years, not picking them up when they were originally put out on like the 200 gram vinyl back in like 2015 or something. But happy to have them now. Here's Snakes and Arrows. Neither of these are among my absolute favorite Rush projects. This is really more so completion than anything. But Snakes and Arrows has grown on me quite a bit. And I do think some of the stuff on here, like Far Cry and Working Them Angels, are as good as anything they did in the last 20 years of their career. Ed Sheeran, Multiply. Possibly my favorite Ed Sheeran record. Been thinking about getting this for a long time. Finally saw one at a price where I was like, yeah, I'll pull the trigger on it. Ed Sheeran's polarizing, and I understand why. But boy, I think when he's on, he is, a pretty sharp songwriter, really good entertainer, really talented. Like, I think the stuff he does with loop pedals is really cool. And, you know, he still goes into kind of the rapping thing that he does a lot on his debut record on here. But it's a little bit more subdued, I think. And the best stuff on here, I think, is genuinely just great pop music. So, yeah, Multiply. Happy to have that one. Couple of Frank Sinatra records here. This is Francis Albert Sinatra and Antonio Carlos Jobim, the 67 record, first collaboration between the two of them. This was very high on my Sinatra ranking. The record itself is actually not in superb condition. This is a mono pressing. It was like a couple dollars, so it was a pretty easy purchase for that price. So yeah, happy to have it, but we'll probably get a better copy at some point. Same is true for Watertown, his 1970s pseudo concept record. That's weirdly ambitious. The last, like, not the last ambitious thing he did, because I guess Trilogy exists, but the last good ambitious thing that he did. Here's the gatefold. You can kind of see that a bit. But yeah, again, a little bit beat up. I think the record itself is actually in better condition on this copy, though. So happy to have both of them, continuing to expand that Sinatra collection slowly but surely. This is John Philip Sousa, conducts his own marches. So this is a collection of original recordings of the March King himself conducting his own material from like the 1890s, 1900s, that sort of thing. So yeah, really cool stuff. You know, it's a collector's item, something that I've kind of picked up for like research purposes and that sort of thing. But yeah, kind of a quirky little thing that I found for pretty cheap. I've not heard this record. This is Southern Avenue with Keep On, but I do know of this band. They opened at the Outlaw Music Festival when I saw them a couple years ago. And they were really, really sharp, like really on fire. The band played really, really well. This is their second album, I want to say. Found this for like super cheap, like $5, I want to say. And it was in like mint condition, so it was a pretty easy pick. I do know, I don't remember, I think like their bass player or somebody passed away last year, which is really tragic. But yeah, really talented, really sharp, great vocals, great like 3-part harmonies that they're doing. Really entertaining and a really great pick to open up the Outlaw Festival. Mavis Staples, Sad and Beautiful World. I talked about this record in the 2025 video. I won't say too much more here, but yeah, just sounds really good. Lots of great collaborators. It's a somber record. It's certainly, you know, one of those albums made by an artist who knows this could be their last thing. But it doesn't beat itself into your head either. And I think it's respectful more than anything. And yeah, you know, some of the cover choices by like Kevin Morby, by Leonard Cohen, Tom Waits, et cetera, et cetera. Just really cool to hear, you know, Staples covering that, and with people like Jeff Tweedy and Justin Vernon and MJ Lenderman backing her up. It's really cool. All right, Behemoth here, another kind of set. This is Sufjan Stevens, Carey and Lowell. This is the 10th anniversary edition. Knew that I wanted to get this, and, you know, ended up pulling the trigger when I was at, I think this was an Indie Earth purchase in Buffalo, Minnesota. Yeah, really cool. Really glad to have, you know, kind of an expanded collection of this. So there's a bunch of like demos and a couple of unreleased tracks on here, as well as a great kind of picture book. So with some really cool artwork. So, yeah, I mean, I adore that album. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. Definitely my favorite Sufjan record, I would say. Not that I couldn't argue there are others that more broadly encompass what Sufjan is able to do, but I think this record in particular is just one that has way too much of an emotional connection to me for me to say otherwise. So, Sufjan, Carey, and Lowell, really happy to have that. Sting, Nothing Like the Sun. Now, I already had a copy of this. However, the copy that I didn't, for whatever reason, I didn't realize it when I was buying it, which was a dumb mistake on my part, was missing an LP. That was part of why it was on the cheaper side. Only one LP was actually in it. So this is an actual, like, proper copy of it. Both LPs are in here. And yeah, I love Sting stuff. Nothing Like the Sun. You know, The Dream of the Blue Turtles is a really strong debut record, but Nothing Like the Sun just ratchets it up a notch. I mean, that is some of the best sophistopop you will hear in the late 80s, up there with like the Sade's of the world, as far as I'm concerned. I know people have their gripes with Sting and people think he's pretentious, but man, I think, you know, at his best, like a lot of the best stuff on here is just superb. Like They Dance Alone. Oh my God. Um, Lazarus Heart is excellent. Uh, Fragile, of course. It's just awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Sam Taylor, Blue Mist. So when I was doing videos of 1955, this was an artist who I did like one of those short videos on. Yeah, very nice kind of ambient stuff. Sam Taylor, saxophonist, tenor saxophonist, and you know this is easy listening. You know this is not bop music. This is not anywhere close to it. This is not even cool jazz. I wouldn't say. Very much easy listening, but boy, it's really nice for what it is. It's really pleasant. And so when I saw that record kind of in the wild, it was a pretty easy purchase. Another folk record here. This is Teresa Troll, The Ways a Woman Can Be, which came out in 1977. Again, I do not have a lot of context to it, but I will shout out the backside of the record for its inclusivity. The liner notes and the song titles alike have both been translated into Spanish to make it more accessible. So that's really cool. Shout out to her. Sarah Vaughan, self-titled record, or Sarah Vaughan with Clifford Brown, depending on how you look at it. Elite album. This was my number 2 record from 1955, I believe. And, you know, there's damn good reason for it. The combination of this lineup with Clifford Brown, who was just everywhere in 55, with Sarah Vaughan, you know, at the time, you know, somewhat of an up and coming vocalist still. But this is absolutely, you know, a career defining moment for both artists, I would say. And, you know, compare this to like Helen Merrill's record from that same year. You know, Merrill works because her voice is kind of unassuming. It can kind of, you know, fill in the gaps between like what Brown is doing, but Vaughan can go toe to toe. Like she is an assertive presence. She is very much a jazz vocalist in the Ella Fitzgerald vein. So, you know, she can scat and finagle melodies with the best of them. And it's just amazing to hear them kind of go off of each other there. Really cool stuff. Scott Walker, The Drift. Yeah, I found this again in a record store in Bemidji, which is not a place where I would expect to find like Scott Walker records. And in fact, the person at the counter at the time, the clerk seemed almost surprised that this was in there. He was like, "Oh my God, what a cool find." Yeah, this is not my favorite of the like second period Scott Walker records, like the stuff he did from Tilt and beyond. Like Tilt is probably my favorite, if I'm being honest. But The Drift is extremely effective in its own way. And yeah, I mean, late career Scott Walker is not for the faint of heart by any means. You know, that kind of dark, you know, spooky, scary ambiance. But it's a really like one of the most like radical evolutions that you will find of any artist from the 60s and beyond. And it's really impressive. It's really fascinating, really, I don't know, thought provoking. I don't know. It just really great stuff. Really, really great stuff. Happy to have one of those records because again, I don't see them in the wild hardly at all. So I guess we'll have to keep an eye out for Tilt and hope that maybe I'll find that in some other rural Minnesotan store. Kitty Wells, Country Hit Parade. This is a record from 1956, actually. One of the ones that I've heard for that project and will again eventually get back to. Yeah, Kitty Wells, one of the early kind of female country music stars. Of course, It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels is a massive achievement. This is a compilation record, I should say, because that track is like 5 years old at the time that this album was released. But, you know, a solid vocalist, you know, very kind of assertive voice, very declarative. You know, not necessarily the finesse that you'll get with like future kind of country singers like your Dollies of the world or whatever, but still a very, you know, a hugely important figure in kind of this evolution, right? Because of how many like female country singers were singing lyrics, you know, that were written by men and meant to be kind of subversive, or if there was a cheekiness to it, still there was never any danger that it was like subverting the whatever the traditional gender stereotypes were. And Kitty Wells is one of the first people who really like is willing to challenge that a little bit and face that backlash. And I don't think that any of the other songs here are at the level of It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels, but that's not to say that it's still not a worthwhile listen, because it definitely is. Two more, and we got one more behemoth here. This is Brian Wilson live at the Roxy Theater, which was initially released in 2000. It had been, out of print for a very, very long time, and they just reissued it late last year. This is kind of the first in what appears to be a general just set of reissues, reevaluations of Brian's solo career, which I think a lot of them were in the works prior to Brian's passing, but certainly now I think there's more incentive to kind of keep the legacy going. I know that they're putting out another live issue for Record Store Day, as well as reissuing his Imagination record, which I am hyped about because I really like that record. But yeah, I mean, a solid release. I know the mixing, there's a lot of criticism with the mixing because some of the vocals for these live tracks are allegedly like flown in from like studio stuff and that sort of thing. I haven't done a super deep dive on that to like confirm, but just again, cool to have some of this stuff reissued and more accessible for the first time in a long time. And yeah, cool triple LP set that has a couple of songs that I don't think were on the original CD, which is really awesome. And we end again with another record that I've not heard yet and don't have anything to say about until I do. This is Kathy Winter and Betsy Rose with Sweet Sorcery, another folk record, another kind of singer-songwriter record, collaboration from the early 80s, I think, 1980, I believe. Again, I'm sorry that I don't have anything to say on those records, but I also, again, like the idea of blind buying things just in general and always having like something in your collection that you haven't heard yet. And again, I really would love to kind of just rely on you all to give your perspectives on some of those records that I've talked about that I didn't have a lot to say on. And if you enjoy them, or if you have other records from those artists that you think are more worth my time or people's time in general, just let me know. But with that said, we made it to the end of this behemoth of a video, catching up on all like 80 something records I think we talked about here, or close to it. So thank you for making it this far. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As always, more videos are to come. Make sure to hit that bell for notifications and tell a friend as well. And with that, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time, right here at your home of the Music Deep Dive. Later.